When you think about everything that is currently happening, you truly have to wonder why more people aren't tuning in to listen to every word of the shit show. I mean,
people are saying that it's a show that has 4 hosts. I don't know why you need 4 people. I mean, I could say what they're saying all by myself. Why do they need to have so many people on the show? They're just losers who want to save the world. It's sad, really. So sad. Anyway, back to the news about the beautiful blowing up of bad people on their bad boats.
As far as that goes, I think we need to really ask ourselves, why would you not watch the shit show? After all, these people are the kind of people we want to keep out of America. They're so focused on stupid things, like the truth. And facts, obviously, they need to be stopped before they get a chance to wake everyone up to the poly crisis. That's when everything goes wrong at the same time.
Welcome to the shit show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's David Coe.
And I am Richard Basalato, on the far right today.
Yeah. So we haven't got Joe. And I'm just looking at. I can't see if we've started on LinkedIn yet, but I'm sure it'll be sorting out. But we do have Ollie, but he hasn't arrived yet. So 7 a.m. Obviously, maybe it's too early for him.
It's an early start.
Yeah. So this time last week, the world, or the US and Israel, was not at war with Iran, and then of course I woke up the next morning and the war had begun. So it's been a bit of an interesting week. I know a lot of people are in a pretty bad place. I've got a lot of friends. I've got family in Dubai, UAE, and I'm sure both of you do as well. So yeah, I mean, what's your take on the week?
Well, I traveled this week, both in and out of London airport, and 2 things immediately strikes you. So much less people, because you've taken all Middle Eastern flights out of the equation. It was noticeable how much less people there are in the airports, how much quicker everything went. Flip side is security was much higher. If you're a single male at my age traveling, particularly brown-eyed, you get picked out immediately. It's just, there's an algorithm at work that basically scrutinizes you a bit further before they let you pass through. And then it's like, oh, your passport didn't work. Strangely enough, my passport always works through the automated gate at first try, every time. Not so much this time. And in Sweden, they asked me a lot of questions.
Right. Interesting. David?
Oh. Well, Ollie's just joined us. So I mean, I think it's like a shocking non-shock, if you know what I mean. All the information was there, sending 2 warships over to aircraft carriers over to the Gulf region, and the comments and so on. I think what is interesting is the way in which it is not actually, the US story, and the way in which actually the BBC, for example, has a US Republican strategist talking about it, is all about that US story that Trump kind of gives in that way. It's a very, it's anybody's kind of guess as to what the real story is. My own view has to do with an innate kind of dislike of Iran, and also a pincer movement on China. That.
Yeah, it's definitely an element of trying to curtail China's access to energy and other materials and curtail their rising power in the world. That's definitely one part of the story. How large it is it 20%? Is it 70%? I don't know. I don't think anyone can put a number on it, but it is certainly a part of the piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. All right. Ollie looks like he's settling. I'm going to bring him up. All right, here he is. Mr. Oliver Gill, thank you so much for joining us. Did your alarm not go off?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So we wanted to thank Ollie for joining us. So we
very much.
Richard's not supposed to be here. Joe's not here. And then we had a special guest who for various reasons, wasn't able to make it. They're going to come back another time. So I said, Ollie, come and join us. So we've got a show with diverse opinions. So we appreciate you being here.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely, yes.
It's a pleasure having you here.
Yeah. Ollie was with us back in October, if you don't remember, talking about building communities. So yeah, he's paying attention just like we all are. And he's got a couple of things he wants to talk about today as well. So yeah, I mean, we were just sort of getting a sense of the week and the maelstrom of news, and it's really hard to know what's happening. You know, we're getting news reports hours after rather than live information. So Israel's got to almost black out. We don't really know what's going on in Iran, although I've seen a few international reporters have gotten boots on the ground now. So, but we're hearing enough. But before we get stuck into this, and then we're going to give Richard most of the microphone because he he's got to leave in about 40 minutes. He's obligated. But I wanted to talk about some other stuff that have happened that I didn't put in the agenda when I sent it to you last night. And so, first of all, the dog killing Kirsty Noem has lost her position and is now, here you go, the US. She's the special envoy for the Shield of Americas, which is apparently a Western Hemisphere thing. Apparently, Trump thinks he has a right to be involved in choosing Iran's next supreme leader, which is just to me another sign that he and most of those people who are in that conversation have absolutely no idea who the Shia leader is and what they mean. And we're seeing a lot of violent protests. I don't know if you've seen it around, especially Muslim-dominated countries across Asia, Pakistan. We've seen a lot. India, we've seen a lot. Because this is like killing the Pope for that group of people. So this is a big thing. Apparently, the US has reached out to Ukraine to help them learn how to use drones. And to me, that's just another classic signal of failure, that they didn't actually understand that that's what this wartime was about. I saw a breaking news piece. I can't confirm if it's true, but apparently some Microsoft data centers have been bombed in the UAE, which is a big deal because NATO and the entire government infrastructure of NATO is basically on Azure. Apparently, the US is not going to let India grow the way China grew. And I thought that was kind of interesting. They've also given them permission to buy Russian oil now that they can't get oil through the Gulf. And finally, we saw the torpedoing of a Sri Lankan warship that was returning from a peaceful exercise off Sri Lanka. Well, the Sri Lankans have decided to dock a second Iranian warship as a humanitarian sort of exercise. So they've done that. And that's obviously going to have geopolitical ramifications for Sri Lanka, which is a country that's been very, very much suffering in the last few years economically. So bravo to the Sri Lankans for doing that. So that's the stuff that we're not going to talk about. Well, we might talk about some of these. But Richard, you would have been having a lot of conversations with a lot of people this week about what this all means as far as war oil, and the economy. There's obviously a lot of conversations going on about it, but I'll hand it over to you and you can kick us off.
Yeah, well, obviously it has had, understandably a big impact on global markets, different in different parts of the world. Initially, it was not actually a huge reaction on oil, which by and large is still the world's most important commodity. Since then, actually, volatility has come down, but the level is a lot higher. You've basically increased the price $10 a barrel from pre-conflict. And pre-conflict, it had already crept up a couple of dollars. So I would say you're probably about $12, $13 higher than you are on crude oil compared to pre-conflict. The rule of thumb is that a 10% increase in the price of oil typically shaves 0.2% of GDP in the US. So you're looking at close to 0.5% lower growth in the US if this sticks, a little bit less in Europe and the rest of the world, which is less dependent on that as a component for its growth. But it will have growth implications and it will have inflation implications for sure. So you're putting central banks potentially in a little bit of a difficult situation, because growth will be going down, but prices will be going up, even though it will take a while for anything to feed through except for prices at the pump. It's understandable that equity markets globally didn't take this very well. First of all, valuations are very high. You price for a perfect scenario, and this is not the perfect scenario. So you had broad-based declines, and the markets that has performed the best and has the highest sensitivity to energy prices, like South Korea, got absolutely murdered over a 2-day session when the South Korean market fell over 20% over 2 days. Now we've seemed to have settled down, and I think people's timeline is increasing. Most people on Monday morning when markets opened were thinking, yeah, it's going to be one of those, they hit hard, they pull back, everything kind of returns to normal, but not. And now everyone is bracing themselves for a much more drawn out, lower octane conflict. Because one of the things, and this is really important when you talk about wars, and people who know a lot more than me about these things, they keep on emphasizing it, is more modern economies, modern militaries like the US, like the UK, China, everywhere. You are not equipped to fight long wars. The modern idea of a war is that it's quick, you use overwhelming force, and it's done. What you don't have the capability to do is use lots of people consuming vast amounts of ammunition and other materials, because they're not available. And that was one of the key parts in Ukraine, that actually NATO didn't physically have equipment and ammunition to back Ukraine up initially, because it takes a long, long time to retool and start producing these things. So if it becomes a drawn-out conflict, per definition, it needs to become low octane, because you cannot keep hitting with very, very large doses of missiles and drones, because you don't have that available.
All right. So so what you're saying is you think it's kind of gonna sort of calm down and simmer down now from a economics point of view, or I mean,
it will be there and it will affect us, and we will be hugely sensitive to news coming out of the region. But you cannot expect the US and Israel to fly wave and wave and keep on hitting Iranian infrastructure week after week, because they don't have those resources. So I think as we move forward, it will become much more targeted how they approach this.
Okay.
I think, just a point, I think it might have been an Iranian warship that was sunk, but that's in Sri Lanka.
Did I not say that?
I think you mentioned the Sri Lanka.
Sri Lankan.
All right, sorry.
Yeah. But I think it's important to sort of remember, because I think there's a sense that this is like Afghanistan kind of thing, that Iran is very different from Afghanistan. It actually provides drone technology to Russia.
Exactly.
Level of technology you think Russia has, that it goes to Iran for the technological know-how to make its drones. So that's sort of the put into context of what it is. It has a very developed environment, very, very developed economy. It has is about the size of all of Western Europe, except without, if you don't include the UK, in terms of its physical size. So you're really looking to try and somehow take over a place of that kind. People think about the Gulf side, which is to the west. To the east is Pakistan and Afghanistan, both of which in support of Iran. And then you have Turkmenistan, which is a neutral country. So you really are kind of, it's not at all something that's as isolated or as so-called backwards as people may conceive of Afghanistan. It's actually a very different sort of place that you're attacking in that way. So really, is it going to have that internal uprising? Is it going to be like an Iraq thing again in that way? And that's very difficult to really tell as to what's going to happen. And I suspect that the more Trump goes on to say, he needs to take over and lead the world and stuff, the more he will have actual Iranian people inside of Iran be against it. He actually bring them together in that way.
Yeah. So one of the things that's sort of been really standing out to me in the last week, and Ollie, if you want to jump in, just let me know.
Psychic.
Is the
Psychic Andrea.
is the once again? I mean, first of all, the definition of insanity. Like, there's no, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But the arrogance of the West and the Western media interpretation of what's going on versus media that I have access to more readily. It's more in my face than probably what you're seeing. It's telling a very, very different story, and just the idea that there's a snake's head to be chopped off in this region. The idea, there was one story that I was reading last night that the US and the Israelis were claiming they took out a whole bunch of bombers, and it turned out they were cardboard cutouts. How much is underground? How long they've been preparing for it? Obviously, the drone aspect, and they're the masters of it. So that there's a lot going on, but the idea that a country like Iran can be subjugated. I was listening to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who has been very passionate this week. If you had a chance to watch him, and he's talking about the psychopath Netanyahu, he's talking about the psychopath Donald Trump, and if that is the case, right? If we have two madmen in control in the US and in Israel, thinking that they can go into a country like Iran and defeat it, that's a bit of a concern for the rest of us, right?
Yeah,
Ollie?
of course it is.
I mean, I'll just say, Ollie, come on, I'll put you up.
Oh, just I was working for a house, and they had two different households within that house, flats that were Iranian or Persian, I should say, really. And obviously, this has been going on for months. And we were there for 2 months at least, a big job, and it was. They wouldn't really be drawn on the whole conflict. They wouldn't. They would say, "Oh, what is happening to my country?" and bring us tea, and it was really nice. Really, really, very, very hospitable, incredibly hospitable. Especially the mum who was in her own flat, and but they wouldn't be drawn on the political side of it. It was almost as though they were keeping stum about it because of the fact that they were elsewhere in another country didn't actually mean that they were safe from outside forces. That everywhere there are factors of the regime in Iran that are keeping an eye on people, making sure that they don't speak out and they don't make a nuisance of themselves to the regime. I'm talking about the regime in Iran. I call it a regime only as a way of defining it. Because I don't know exactly how much of a regime they are. I think they are a regime, but they certainly keep a lid on the people who are elsewhere in the world, and that struck me as very pertinent to the whole idea that they're going to just cave in to Trump coming out with this nonsense about surrender and I will choose the new leader. It just seemed completely surreal the way he was talking about it, like a child, sort of ranting about something, which is what he is really.
No,
I mean, just want to. Abby's just popped up with the question. Wait a minute, let me just get it up here. What is the story from the point of view of the Iranian people? So I've seen three versions of this story, right? So there's obviously the people that Ollie's talking about, the fundamentalists within Iran. Then there's the city people in Iran who are the ones out protesting on the streets, including, and then of course you've got the exile Iranians. But there's a fourth. There's another group, and who want to see change in Iran, but they don't want it forced from outside of Iran. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different. So what is the point of view of the Iranian people? I mean, there's a lot of different points of view from the Iranian people, and the people in the city are different to the people outside of the cities who are much more traditional in their outlook and much more supportive of it. But the point is, the idea that anyone external can change a country internally is historically, it's always wrong. It's always wrong, you know.
I want to add to that a little bit. I think Iran is not North Korea. Iranian people who are outside of it regularly go back and come back out and come back and come back out, basically. So as Ollie says, you know, there are Iranians who are from the modern Iran, as in the post-revolution Iran, the current one. It's just useful to think of what it is actually, because, you know, kind of the oil has dominated the modern era of Persia. Winston Churchill converted the British Navy from coal to oil. That prompted the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which became BP. And that was on a trade deal that took all the money out of Persia and left the Persians with nothing, which then triggered all the issues that followed along in that. The Iranian had basically kind of rejected, as other states, that kind of arrangement that led to the imposition of a monarchy, the Shah, in the way as a Western puppet over that time, which then got turned over by the current regime. So it has always been about the Western trying to impose its rule on it for the past 100-something years in that way, and failing along in that way, and is part of that relationship. Iran, however, is a major contributor to the resistance and terrorist groups within the region, and it does not look kindly on Israel by any means, and does not look kindly on the US. And the previous Ayatollah did come out with that fatwa on Salman Rushdie for writing the satanic verse in that way. That made him go and hide away for several decades, I believe it was, in that path. Yeah. So there is definitely this kind of very extreme element to it in that sense. It's also a country that the US sold arms to in the 80s by Ronald Reagan in order to fund this effort to try and topple over the Nicaraguan government as a way to do that. So Iran and the CIA and the US have always had a bit of awkward dealings in that sense, and also the completely total failed attempt by the American special forces to try and rescue their people from it, which left America basically with a really nasty taste of what happened on there. Of course, the Iran-Contra affair left the Americans with a very nasty taste. And for that, it then tried to have this decade-long war by sponsoring Iraq to try and topple over Iran, and failed, and ultimately ending up with the Americans wanting to topple Iraq. Yeah, as a result now. And it sits between Afghanistan and Iraq. So to the east of Iran is Afghanistan, to the west of Iran is Iraq. So it feels like, you know, here's a chunk in the middle that surely we can do something about, and wanting to do so. But so I think that the first thing that's really kind of obvious in a sense about what the Iranian people want is nobody wants their place to be bombed, whichever way you think of that. As for what happened to the uprising, a lot of it is because of the economic difficulty, and that economic difficulty, as I said, Iran is a place that is able to actually teach a very advanced country like Russia how to make drones, which is a very advanced technology. So it's actually quite an advanced country in that way. But what it has been having problems with is water. It has been having significant drought in this region over multiple years. So there's been a lot of hardship that's been going on. That, together with the sanctions, have actually caused a lot of the, when things like that happen, or the mismanagement gets shown up. Every country has mismanagement. In times of difficulty, the mismanagement rises up onto the surface, and everybody can see it, or effectively, not that they rise, but the tide goes out. In this case, literally, because the water's missing, and exposes it. So what you're then left with is a lot of unrest, a lot of those sort of things that's going on. The Hamas situation with Israel, Iran was quite firmly that you can't treat the Palestinians in that way, in that form.
Yeah.
And then you have the Israelis bombing Iran, was 8 months ago, and that that was the first sort of part to say, look, we're going to try and come to you. So you're not like suddenly going into Afghanistan with a surprise attack or anything. In fact, you've given everyone 8 months notice to prepare for it. And I'm pretty sure the Iranians have been preparing for it. I'm sure that every country who worry about that sort of thing has been. But I can assure you that the Gulf states have not. They have been on the side of thinking that they are untouchable.
And I think I think that's the thing. I'm just going to Avi's talking to us, so I just wanted to just sort of show, a successful American countryman. He's a comedian. He sent out a thing. You're entitled to your opinions from your safe home, but can you relate to the pain of the oppressed? And like I think it's really important that we're not talking about, like, what David's sharing is a long and convoluted history. When I hear people talking about it, the ones who are trying to be balanced, saying none of us think the Iranian regime is a good thing and has, but I am a believer that if a country wants to change, it needs to change from within. It's the only way you have a successful regime change. Otherwise, you've got a failed state. And, we can see what's happening in failed states around the world. It's not a good thing for the people, right? So we're not a one side, other side. It's an implication. What does this mean for all of us? But I wanted to bring China into the conversation, because I know, David and Richard, you've been having a lot of conversations around what this means. My understanding is China's got 7 to 9 months of what it needs to keep going with disruption. What are you sort of seeing and hearing? Because it's one of the BRICS, right?
I think it's definitely an operation aimed at curtailing China's influence and power in the world. Whether that is, a small percentage of the calculation behind hitting Iran, or whether it's the major reason, it's open for debate, and I'm not sure anyone can actually articulate that with absolute clarity, but it is a part of the equation. But what I think it does on a much larger scale for China is, you look at China's vulnerabilities as a country, and energy imports in the form of oil is the glaring one. Apart from that, they're pretty self-sufficient, but they need to find oil somewhere. You've taken Venezuela out of the equation. You're now taking Iran out of the equation. It kind of leaves China more or less captive to Russian oil. And that becomes a real problem. And it becomes a real problem because I fundamentally believe that China is probably quite close to throwing Putin under the bus, because he's becoming an embarrassment and a distraction for them. This prolongs a Chinese dependency on Russian oil, because you're basically curtailing other venues for getting the imports they need. And potentially, it also increases Chinese support for the Russian war machine. And that's not a good thing, because that's what you are left with, because you have already tried to curtail my other venues. If China had a safe, secure way of having access to the oil it needs without having to rely on Russian oil, I'm fairly sure that Putin would be history by now.
Well, that puts a different spin on things.
Yeah.
Because what about the whole reaching out to Ukraine to teach them about drone warfare? You know, because Zelensky's saying you have to help us.
I think,
You need to help us with peace if you want us to help you with this.
Yeah,
I think this is the point. You know, the world is actually going to become a lot more tit-for-tat-ish in that way out of this. It's not just sort of Iran. Avi has a comment about the investments that that Iran makes on essentially the terrorist regime. I mean, Richard and I were doing a summary of what we thought of the world back in July 2024, and we kind of thought of the 5 regions: US, kind of China, Russia, European Union, and Iran. And we had Iran there because it is that kind of heart of that sort of terrorist action in that way. Now, this terrorist action, if you take the comment on things like the Palestine action in the UK and so on, has shifted quite a lot over time between what actually, whose view is it? Most terrorists is defined from the perspective of the Americans and from the British sort of perspective. The terrorists view themselves as fighting for their freedom. The people they fight against view being terrorists. There is this thing about the fact that they're terrorists because they fight in a way which is not conventional. That's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to bring out. Is this aspect of unconventional. And the action here violates many of the aspects of how a country, a sovereign state, should act with regards to another. Avi also makes a point about Germany and Japan. Those countries were invading others, and the response of it led to the war, as opposed to what's happening here, which is the country is there and another one just doesn't like it and decide to bomb the shit out of it. That's going to be a pattern we're going to see a lot more out of this across many areas where there are potentials for conflict, because it's actually opened the door to that kind of action in a much bigger way. China, interestingly, there's a report about the coal production in China that says it's producing a lot more than it's using, and where it's gone to make oil.
Yeah.
The Germany was doing that. That was the end period when it access to oil. Coal to oil is extremely bad for climate emissions because it takes a lot of energy. It's the worst you can do. It's worse than just burning coal.
You basically burn it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So China is going down that route in preparation for really a squeeze on its source of energy in that way.
So David, what about can Europe help China with oil? How would that go down? It wouldn't go down very well, would it? I mean, if I can name Norway, for example, who love to export oil, and pretend that they're very green, but they love to export their oil and put all the money in their sovereign account, don't they?
I think there isn't really the production capacity to produce oil. This is another thing. Diesel price has gone up by kind of quite a lot over this period in the UK, for example, because the refining capacity for diesel isn't really there. So it's going to impact the cost of those things. Actual industrial processes, industrial trucks. You've got a 400-ton mining truck. You run diesel. You don't run petrol, because diesel has about 15% more energy than petrol by the same volume, by the same amount that you'd be using. So all of these things lead effectively to I think the worst part is going to do is going to encourage a lot of really unilateral actions among a lot of small states about how they want to behave and depend on each other. And many of them are going to be squeezed into it because it's going to be the money that squeezes it, their ability to buy food or to import food and all of those things from around the world. The energy at the moment at $80 is not a problem. It's been there many times before. It just means that the hope for reduction in costs, which was never going to come anyway, is just now really realistically not going to come in the same way.
I think if we tie it back to Ollie's question before, because I think this is super interesting on a grand geopolitical scale, is Europe has opted, and over the last 4 or 5 years has opted to more and more vilify China. So you have kind of joined forces with US as painting it as the new potential enemy, because frankly Russia doesn't count anymore. That makes it very, very difficult when actually from a game theory point of view, the big play Europe could make or should have been able to make here is effectively distancing themselves from the US, because it's clear that US is now about US and not about NATO anymore. Make a much bigger grand alliance with China, ensuring that China cuts off any kind of support for Russia, and you stop the war in 2 weeks. You basically stop the war in 2 weeks on Ukraine's terms, because Russia is done without Chinese support. But it's very hard to see, given the rhetoric that has been used over the last couple of years, that Europe would be politically capable of aligning themselves with China that way. But that's the obvious major play to make if you believe that Europe will ever matter again in the grand scheme of things politically. But I don't think current crop of European politicians either has the intellectual or the moral courage to do that. I just don't see that kind of leadership or, understanding of the big parts, because the most pressing issue is definitely that you have a war on your doorstep. And if Russia actually succeeds and break Ukrainian resistance, you can have millions of refugees coming across, and it's the end of the European Union.
I think Spain's action, Spain is the one country that says no, you're not part of this war, you're not going to use this in that way. So out of Europe, the reason why Europe, when Richard and I were thinking about this back in 2024, was in that list was because of its then kind of moral and ethical stance compared to the other regions in that way. And then to us, its policy was always going to try and maintain that. But since the way things have looked, is that it's actually made itself much less relevant. It's backtracked on most of its kind of climate policies. It's backtracking on its actual defense stance. It's completely stuck with kind of not knowing whether there are wars, that there are situations of conflicts that it needs to be engaged in, or whether it just cowers out in that way. And the UK has lost its direction in that completely.
But I mean, don't you think so? I wanted to comment. Sorry, I just wanted to comment to Avi's comment about, can you imagine if you waited for Japan and Germany of World War II to change from within? That's the end of the war. We're at the beginning of the war. And I think these are two different conversations. It's how we respond now. But the Spanish Prime Minister, who's sounding really good, but there's a bit of a cynical element to it. They're going down in the polls. And there's an election coming up, and it's all about making sure that the far right don't get in. But then, of course, for the wider European continent, and you guys are there, their backtracking is because anything that they've done has increased the far right rise across Europe. So, it's like.
Yeah, and I think, as for timing of why the war, I think it's relevant that, Trump had a terrible State of Union speech.
Yeah.
It got terrible reception even amongst his own party.
And the Epstein presidency, right?
And the Epstein presidency and all of those things along. So it's always the favorite thing to do, kind of go bomb someone. and blame it all on them. And this aspect to which, American lives are going to be attacked, and somehow we are at an existential threat if we don't bomb them now. It's exactly the same playbook as what got into the Iraq War. The same thing with the Tony Blair at that time about how it's a 40-minute warning in those sort of things.
I think they did a better job of selling the wars before they actually did them, right? This time they're trying to sell the war and changing it as they go, right? The amount of reasons.
Yeah.
Well, weapons of mass destruction was the main one, wasn't it? They had to prove the weapons of mass destruction. They had to prove the link, and they didn't. And they fluffed it, and they tried to push it through. And I was on that march in 2003, and they said it was 1.5 million. It was much bigger than that. It was huge. It was a great day, actually. Fantastic. A really organized bit of demonstrating by the British people, and the same in America as well, I understand. So it was very unified, and yet we were called by Tony Blair, the people demonstrating, we were called terrorists.
Yes, which goes down to the comment again. And I was on that march. I don't go on marches. I was on that march. I actually met many people who don't go on marches that actually knew on that march, which shows you how that thing was totally uncoordinated at random, that you run into someone along. Just sort of says, well, everybody's out on this.
We could just walk to it from Notting Hill, literally.
I'm gonna put Richard up. He's got 4 minutes, and he's gonna have to jump off. So just when you look at it from the big picture perspective, for economic impact and geopolitical impact, what's your feeling about what's next?
It becomes more and more unpredictable. I'm fairly confident it's going to be a drawn out process. With a lower impact, lower magnitude than we've seen. This was like the initial blast. From here on, it's going to be more of a tug of war, limited efforts. But I'm going to stick one dynamite stack in here before I leave. Because if we accept two premises about the whole conflict, which I think is universally accepted. The first is that the West will be extraordinarily reluctant to put boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what it would take for Trump to actually commit American troops to land in Iran and start conducting a ground war, because you change the casualty arithmetic on a scale of 100 to 1 or something like that. The other thing is in the background, and we talked about it, touched upon it when we said Iran has been preparing for this. I mean, it's a very advanced society. We might dislike the leadership for the moral standings, but they're not stupid. Mm. If you also accept that Iran's overarching aim for half a century has effectively been to dominate the region of the Gulf, because it's one of the two superpowers in the Gulf, and the other one is Saudi. The ultimate aim of Iran has always been to overthrow the House of Saud and change regime in Saudi Arabia and become the dominant force. The path they have opted to use to do that has been to arm their proxies around the world, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, to conduct terrorist attacks, to effectively engineer a situation where they can depict the Saudis as Western stooges and say they are not actually Islamic, and you need to create an uprising against what are the infidels by proxy in the region. Then all of a sudden now, this actually becomes a gigantic Iranian opportunity to do exactly that. But given how badly Hamas and Hezbollah fared against Israel, it would have looked a lot better without the Gaza attack. Basically, they undermined their own case, I think, for actually luring the US into a more advanced conflict, where the end result is that they will actually manage finally in their world to overthrow the Saudi Arabian regime, because you get a war between West and true Islamic people.
Can you just explain that a little bit more about the Gaza bit that you said? Because
Israel is the enemy because they're the people in the region who are not Islamists.
Yeah.
So Iran wants to create a conflict of West versus Islam. And in that situation, they can effectively paint the Saudis as being a proxy for Westerners in the region. And actually, we need to get rid of them to make this our part of the caliphate.
Yeah.
Without a lot of infidels infiltrating us. So you use Hezbollah, you use Hamas to create these situations of conflicts, hoping ultimately that Muslims around the world will take that side and create a situation where you plot us versus them and include the Saudis in them. But because Gaza backfired so badly on them, and Hamas and Hezbollah proved militarily incapable on any level to engage Israel, you have now weakened those two forces so much that I think it's more difficult to achieve that, because who here would want to align themselves with Hamas and Hezbollah? You know, I might not like Israel and I might not like the Americans, but Jesus Christ, these guys, you cannot show up on their side here, right? So it's going to be difficult, but if they have prepared and prepared well, I think they will ultimately not necessarily be either afraid or worried about this, because again, ultimately your aim is actually to reestablish an Iranian caliphate in the region as the dominant power. And now I've sucked you into a war. What it hinges on is the people of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and other groups in the countries dominated by more Western leaderships to rise up. And then you have a real mess, and oil won't stay at $75. I can promise you that.
Yeah. All right, Richard, I know you need to go, so I'll take you off the screen. So one of the things I'm sort of getting a sense of, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, is when I first went to the Middle East in the 90s, a white Caucasian woman, wandering the streets was not necessarily a welcome thing, right? And I heard comments and experienced things that weren't very pleasant, but that it changed so much since the mid-90s. The international growth, right across the UAE and every country, right? I just feel like there's a rising war against the Muslim nations of the world that's going to unite the Muslim nations of the world, although they're splitting at the moment. I don't know if you've seen the protests in Bahrain against the leadership of Bahrain, which are an external. I can't remember which part they're part of. So, we could be looking at a lot of progress that has been made economically, developmentally for people in that region, all slipping away, and it could either fracture within the Muslim nations, the Shia, the Sunnis, that fracture, or it could be them against us. And then where's our world going at a time when we can't afford war from a planetary perspective, which is ultimately the biggest concern that all of us have. I know. Are you guys feeling what I'm feeling?
Well, a bit lowered, yes.
A bit what?
Lowered. A bit lowered by the whole situation there.
Yeah.
It's disturbing, obviously. And what came to mind when Richard mentioned about water, David mentioned about water, both did actually, is that Iran has a huge job on its hands to find water. They may have their oil blocked out now, or temporarily blocked out, but now they're going to have to find water, and they do have water. They do have a lot of water, but they're going to have to go back to the old ways about it. I've talked about this before, and I think it's important. The fact that they have this extraordinary series of qanats or afflage, right across the country. It's actually the largest amount of qanats. They've got about 25%. I mentioned talking to these people in the house about about the situation, and the thing that they really lit up about was the qanats. They probably had about 25% of them still running, and if you go back to 1965, they actually had 7 times the Nile River discharge. 7 times annually was coming through from these qanats that were maintained and were looked after, and that produced this extraordinary amount of water that was taken to all parts of Iran by small gullies and canals. And it was a beautiful thing. It would create all this water for them. It would create cool housing inside, because the qanats would go right into the houses. And it was a huge supply of water. Now they've got that. Theoretically, the water is still up in the hills, in the mountains, and where the qanats go to, basically up into the mountains. But they don't have the people anymore. Have kind of given up maintaining them. It's a dying like eternal fountain, if you like, of water. So they do have an option. I know they've got no water. They've got no water. It's gone. It's dried up. They've been in huge drought, but they do still have the mountain water. Problem is, people have been down drilling from the top and then just basically down drilling and extracting the water from the top. So they've been lowering the water levels of the mountain aquifers, so that the mountain aquifers now are below the levels of the qanats. So the qanats obviously aren't delivering the water anymore. A standard Roman level, if you like, has been reached. Therefore, they are not even getting water from the qanats. They can still go back to that, stopping the drilling and allowing the mountains to replenish the aquifers. That takes a little time, obviously, in order for the whole system to work again. So they do have an option for water. They could generate a lot of youth involvement in this. It might help steady some of the kind of uprising that went on. It might help. It might not. It might make it worse, because people have to. It's hard work, really hard work. But it could help a lot. But it's there. That's the point. And it's one thing less to worry about. But they have to be organised about it. Now they would do it. They'd probably get bombed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The water thing, and of course the other side of the water conversation is, well, Iran bomb the salination plants across the Middle East, of the countries with American, military or data centers or whatever. And that's obviously one of the risks. And by the time we hit that point, then, that the war is going to be in a very different place. Although there's a lot of bombing going on that the Iranians are saying they're not responsible for. So that's another side of things. So just to go through some news, more than 1,200 have now died. There's when we talk about the long scale of war, America obviously doesn't have an appetite for long war. It doesn't have an appetite for boots on the ground. 75% of the country are saying they don't support the war. But there's another impact beyond just the oil, and that is, of course, agriculture. So potash and phosphates, they're both mined from different natural deposits, and some of that is natural gas. So just as the farmers are going into their planting season, the cost of those are going up. We talked about the Spanish leader. US air defenses may not be able to intercept many of Iran's one-way drones. So that's a fighting skill that they don't have in this war. So what else has been jumping out from a news perspective? Do you want to jump in, David?
Well, I think underlying this, my basic sense is, when I look at it, everybody thinks about Iran and the region. It is immediately, but for me, this is actually more about the broader signal. Everything I think we're seeing is essentially kind of like a signal of what we're going to expect to come around in that way. Physical environment is important to us. As the physical environment is put under stress, that makes everything else more difficult. I mentioned it before. It's like having to carry a backpack of stones around you all the time. Just makes you trip more easily and everything else. And when things get more difficult, you get social unrest, you get tension, and you get all of those things associated with it. It's going to create more conflicts. 2025 Global Peace Index says the world is in the worst state ever. Every region of the world, except for South America, has a deterioration in peace. And these are kind of countries with each other. We are fragmenting off. The UN is in a terrible sort of situation in the sense of the role it was supposed to be doing of just kind of buffering the conflicts and trying to prevent them from kind of exploding out all around. So I think we're going to see those sort of things continuing on. America's not going to stop doing this. It's just naive to think that it's going to do so. And this aspect of thinking about, well, what does America doing this really mean? It's demonstrating it wants to control all of the oil around because it still sees that as being an energy source. Venezuela, Canada, Iran in that way. These are all the major sources along with it to take over Russia if it could, without a doubt. And this is from the side of a country where its people have gone to say, we need to be great again in that way.
That imperialism conversation we had last week, right?
Yeah, and it's not going to go away. I think this is more than just simply Trump. You think of Hegseth, or J.D. Vance and those sort of people. They're going to be around after. I think Kirsty Noem being fired is interesting because it's sort of showing how it's a disconnect from the presidency side between the reality that Kirsty Noem has to face and deal with and what it wants to happen. And it's going to repaint that reality. And we're in a world where we can do that. The media is quite able to do that. So the way I'd kind of think about looking at it is forget the media and what it says. Just think about actually what does a war, what does a conflict actually say to you? Step back a bit away and then think about, the consequence of that, the movement of people. People always get displaced in a war, whether you like it or not. What are the borders? Where are the people that they will go? Europe is going to see immigration. It can't fend it off. It's different from America because America has a notion on either side that actually separates us along much easier. Here you got the Mediterranean, you got other things. And you know what? Europe has a much older population than America as well. It actually needs that immigration. And America is going to realize that as well along with it. And so that is not going to come smoothly. That is going to come at the point of the gun along the way. As in, a gun on the shores of Europe trying to shoot them back away and finding out actually even that won't stop it. And the conflict will increase that, and the environmental issues will increase that.
So I hope this war will increase interest to reinvestigate World War II. Something doesn't add up in that narrative. Jaeger, do you know Jaeger?
No, I'm not sure what in the World War II narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. It's funny looking at some of these comments because people are very clearly looking at a perspective which is absolutely fine. But sort of more broadly, so one of the things we were talking about was Pakistan and Afghanistan are on the other side of Iran. And of course, they've been at war for the last few weeks, hardly getting any mention in the media, even on sites like Al Jazeera, which is a Middle Eastern Qatari based. But the other thing about the boots on the ground is Iran has been getting some of the most extreme heat records of the entire world. And we are moving towards the heat season for this region. But, so when you think of like a country like India, who's got permission from America to get oil from Russia, if they didn't, they would have to be burning more coal to guarantee the electricity supply as we move into this extreme heat season. And if the El Nino impact is going to be here, it's going to be another record one. But Iran, their temperatures have been in the high 50s in the last few years. So the concept of boots on the ground, even not even boots on the ground, drones, planes, they won't be able to fly because it will be too hot for the engines to run, right? So there's a lot of things at play here, right? But there's the insecurity of it. So Ayatollah Khomeini's son looks like being the successor if he survives, obviously. But Tucker Carlson, who I am obviously not a fan of, he's the one that reported for the first time that that Mossad had been arrested in Qatar and Saudi for planting bombs in those countries. Did you guys see any? It's sort of starting to pick up a bit of media coverage.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything else that jumped out?
But that did, certainly. It seemed a bit odd, a bit ridiculous to me, but I don't know. It's
but then the Iranians are saying, we're not doing that,
Yes.
So,
Well, I think the one thing, I've come before. I mean, I expect terrorism to rise. I expect terrorism in Europe, across the world to increase. In Europe, in particular, the US likely to want to, and also cyber terrorism will increase out of this. So, the cyber terrorism is the way to attack the actual physical infrastructure these days. Because our trade doesn't work when kind of the website goes down. It sounds naive, but actually that's basically what it is, and it has huge impact in today's world. Actual physical terrorism is what Iran has always been recognized as having that role along, and the way is the rationale for it has always been along the reasoning Richard just gave. They believe in this sort of Islamic presence in the way that it sees it, as opposed to other kind of Muslims see it in that way, and it's going to carry on. I think the one thing that's important to recognize also is that there are many Muslims in the world, and they're not all just Arabic in that way. And Iran is an Arabic nation.
I live in Singapore.
And
one of the biggest is south of me, and there's another one north of me. Yeah, it's not just an Arabic thing.
And so that's that connection there. And Iran is a Shia belief in Muslim, which is where the leadership comes directly from the Prophet Muhammad, and the Sunnis have a different sort of belief of that leadership in the Islam in that way, and that's where Trump having a say over the leader is completely at odds with what grounds Iran is basically saying you cannot be Shia Muslims anymore. He has no indication, no appreciation of what that means.
Yeah, to me, it sort of it reminds me of the Chinese saying they wanted to pick the next Dalai Lama. It's an equivalence to me. But the other thing that popped up, and there's just two quick stories I want to go through. But one is the recruitment of the Kurds in Iran to fight the war on the ground. I kind of saw that, and I'm like, those Kurds, they deserve a land. They always come to the call, and they always get screwed over by everybody in it. They deserve their land. One of the big stories, of course, was the bombing of the school of primary school girls. To me, that was a big one. As a parent, it was a big one. But I think that is an international war crime, and no one is saying they're responsible for it.
It's Israel.
But they're not saying it yet. There's an investigation. But 165 people died, the majority of them primary school age girls. So that was bloody horrible. But the other thing that's been coming up is for a very long time, I've said nobody that believes in the end of time should be allowed in any form of power, whether it's leading a business or government or anything. And apparently President Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. And his return is, of course, Jesus. And so there's been all these complaints made, but this whole end times push. And if you're not aware of it, this has been in the background for a very, very long time. There are a group of people in America who are very, very passionate about this. They're doing everything to drive it forward. You know, I've always sort of thought if it's a prophecy, it will naturally occur versus being forced to occur. And you know, when you kind of put that under the sort of the mix of what's going on, it kind of makes you sort of sit into the real chaos of the situation we're in and the possible angles where we could go, whether it becomes, you know, the rest of us against the Muslim world, or the Muslim world fractures, or, you know, like all of it. And that's a bit of a concern for me. Who wants to jump in on that one?
There's a good Moby song about this, Chris Christopherson, called "Jesus Coming Down Dressed as a Soldier," and that kind of fitted in with this whole nonsense of Jesus in the sky, and you know, this is going to get the troops to fight harder, you know, and they'll be saved by this nonsense. That just popped up. But about the girls' school, I was reading. I couldn't read all of the article. They're so very long. But basically, the theory is that the Israelis they saw a military establishment, a training school, basically on one side, and they saw the girls' school on the other. So they just bombed the girls' school. They just got it mixed up, or they just did it on purpose in a way.
But
But
the
they
Israelis
knew
don't do that.
no,
right?
they don't make mistakes like that. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was maybe it was a calculated move to really outrage these kids. Were aged 7 to 12, I think, or 11 or 12. They were kids. They were little small children, just in school. There's something deeply cynical and horrible about it. Psychopathic, in fact, just like you mentioned earlier. These psychos who are seemingly running the world. So it was a heinous act indeed, and it wasn't called out. And I mean, I don't hear anything from the UN. It feels like they've been completely pushed aside in this entire situation. And maybe they're just staying to one side for the time, because I'm quite certain Trump is bringing hell and damnation to the whole area. And when they reach a certain point, they'll just call in the UN to rescue them in some sort of peacekeeping capacity. It's bound to happen. And in fact, that would be the only sane thing to do at this moment. But we'll see.
Yeah, the UN's been talking, but I think it's just it's going so far now. And so how do we even pull back? You know, where this is that step too far that's going to really sort of potentially drive us all off the cliff into complete and total chaos and societal breakdown. It's funny, I've got these 8 categories of the polycrisis, and one of them is politics and geopolitics, right? And I've got it in the causes of the polycrisis and the outcomes of the polycrisis. And politics and geopolitics should be in an outcome. You know, once we have planetary breakdown, all that sort of stuff, the outcome is that. But what we're actually finding ourselves in is a world. There's all over the world. There's different extremist groups, fundamentalists, you know, ideologues, those sort of things. They're actually causing this stuff to happen. You know, it should have been an outcome of breakdown, but it's actually the breakdown is actually being forced by these groups of really crazy people, and we've got to get them out of power. We've got to get them out of the way, because and it's not just America.
I think what makes it a polycrisis is this commingling of cause and effect, that the outcome itself is the cause in that way. You basically lost the normal thinking has a causal kind of, you know, almost timeline of this happens and then that happens along with it. But what happens with it is that people anticipate, and they take advantage of things before it fully transpires. So they see situations arising and they tap into emotions. The channel for that is emotions in the human world, because we react with our emotions far faster than something actually happens. And that actually changes the ordering, allows people to take advantage and change the ordering. That's why the social media thing is such an issue, because it taps into our kind of psyche, our emotions in that way.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the news, the noise you hear about Jesus and all the rest of it. I want to go back into the quote in the Bible about false prophets, which is to beware of them. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves, and you will know them by their fruits. So, you know them by their fruits. So figure out whether you're gathering grapes or whether you are actually being stung by them. And that's basically the essence of it. So you're going to hear all kinds of things. And I think what happens out of all this is that, these bear bad fruits. They bear fruits that you don't actually want to eat. You don't want to be bombed. You don't want to be displaced. You don't want to have people on your doorsteps who are blaming you for things that you feel you have nothing to do with in that way along. And you don't want a situation where the connections between countries that actually allow good trade to flow be broken. The Strait of Hormuz at the moment, 20% of the world's oil goes through that. Most of the produce to the Gulf states go up and down into it.
Yeah.
And that's now being effectively closed along in that way.
Yeah.
You don't really want that. Think of the Gulf states. They are actually under siege because the airlines have shut and the Strait of Hormuz have shut. So Iran has Pakistan and Afghanistan to its east, and they will continue moving things along in there. To the west of the Gulf states is actually, you still got this channel, which is the Suez Canal, going up along there, and you've got the Houthis in Saudi Arabia down at the bottom, in Yemen and things. So that will threaten it as the next stage of what will happen there, of traffic into there. So the whole thing is kind of spreading along in that way, and the Gulf states will find themselves effectively under siege if this prolongs.
Well, I suppose it depends if the Iranians sort of escalate more towards the Middle Eastern infrastructure beyond American infrastructure, right? So the water and because the food is really important.
If it continues, then there is no distinction.
I get it. I get it from what you're talking about from the Gulf of Hormuz, but if they've got no water, that if they go for the desalination plants, that's a really big thing. So I want to move on to another story. So, but basically, this is a big global crisis. The ripple effects are going to be felt like places like Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia. There's massive impacts in this part of the region as well. So it's a very big deal what we're facing with, and we very much need cool heads to prevail. So now we see if that happens, or are we being truly led by psychopaths? And if we are, then we need to be doing something about that. But Ollie, let's completely change the subject. We're still going to talk about water. There's a series in the UK called Dirty Business. I haven't found a place where I can watch it yet. I know it's on your sort of channel, but
Channel 4.
Like the story of the British water system. It's privately owned. I know Macquarie Bank in Australia owns one of them, and it's just a bloody disaster. Just one of the core needs of humanity. We need clean air, clean water, and we need food to eat, right? So the idea of privatizing that for profit and expecting them to invest in that infrastructure to keep it good, always seemed like a bit of a stupid idea. I don't know what Margaret Thatcher was thinking about, but Ollie, tell us more.
Well, the Macquarie basically took on Thames Water, and they had a debt, I think, of about 2 billion, and they took it in their period of ownership, which I think was about 15 years. They took it to 10 billion debt, and then they offloaded it. And in that time, Macquarie basically asset stripped the whole thing. They just stripped it out. They didn't just load them with debt. They actually stopped. They stopped maintaining the processes of particularly of sewage to the extreme. They sold off land. They sold off pumping stations. They sold off basically anything they could, and they literally stripped down this huge infrastructure of Thames. And now I think they're in Southern Water, or they have a holding in Southern Water. They stripped it all down to nothing, to skeletons. And the result of that really rapacious and more rapacious behaviour, but just basically on the English public, particularly less so the Welsh and the Scottish. It was that they created a system that was collapsing all the time, that could not cope with levels of sewage, could not just in storm periods, but the whole time, and that basically was venting sewage out into the rivers, any river that was near it, pristine rivers, even chalk streams, which are protected by UN, not quite protected by global heritage yet, but they are. That's going to be next. That's actually going through the Parliament at the moment. So they basically just created a huge shitstorm.
Tell us why chalk streams. So if you don't remember, Ollie's a stonemason, so he works with his hands. But why are chalk streams so important?
Oh wow! Chalk streams are the rainforests of England. They're the only really unique water feature that England particularly has. We have 160 out of, I think it's 230 chalk streams in the world. The most of the rest are in northern France, Brittany, Normandy, that sort of thing, and they've got a few too. The chalk streams are basically they are absolutely glass clear water, and that I'll come back to something else which is interesting at the moment as well, to do with Japan, places like that. But the chalk streams basically they filter water, again aquifer water, mountain water, hill water, basically, and they filter it through a limestone, and Winchester actually uses one of their limestone aquifers as a cleaning agent. They actually clean Winchester sewage, goes straight through the limestone aquifer, and it comes out the other side as perfect clean water. So these chalk streams are basically purifying water, feeding water from the hills. They were laid down in the retreat of the last ice age, and they have gravel beds as well with them, and they are pristine waterways, rivers, really. I mean, they call them streams, but they're little rivers, and they have a wonderful ecology to them. They also obviously have a wonderful fish, trout, and so on, and they are beloved by fly fishermen fishing for trout, who are absolutely adore them. Fergal Sharkey, who did you might remember from the Undertones.
Yeah, he's doing great work.
he's absolutely epic about all of this. But unfortunately, over the years, the chalk streams have been predated upon, both for abstractions of water by water companies, which is. Okay, the water will be taken from chalk streams, but this is over abstraction of it. But also the washing of things like watercress. To start with, watercress, you think a watercress, that's a natural thing to find in chalk streams, quite natural. But then more and more of the stuff is grown and washed in chalk streams. Now, what that does is it's fine, but it changes the chemical makeup of the water itself, because watercress is coming in, and now salads are being brought in as well from Spain and so on by truck. And it puts much more, I think it's more nitrates go into the water, so it changes the composition of the water. So that brings in more algae and things like that. Knock-on effects, basically. So that happens.
Also, we can have watercress in our salads, right?
Precisely, yes. So there's a huge washing industry that goes on in chalk streams, and of course the locals are up in arms about this. I mean, it's a classic thing on the Itchen, but it's these streams are just so precious and so important to protect as well against. It's always predators, isn't it? Predation coming in. Take some of that. I'll have some of that. But going back, those are the chalk streams, and they are obviously under threat too from pollution, from sewage as well. Less so, thank goodness, but it's still, a feature. It's still in the mix. And of course, the end result of what's called Dirty Business on Channel 4, the series, I haven't seen part 3 yet. I found it too harrowing, actually. The first 2 parts were too shocking in many regards, about the human story, the small human stories, people affected by sewage in a really awful way. That the whole idea that the water companies can actually do this to people. They can, you know, there is a certain amount of sewage that can be flushed out during storm times. That's kind of been an accepted thing. I don't accept it. I don't think it can. You should have to accept that. You build infrastructure to deal with that, and they have been building infrastructure, but it's been very affected again by cuts in finance and things like that. So it's very slow in coming through. But particularly the huge ring tunnel, and there's another large tunnel that's been built out of London as well. It's a place where you don't want to be when they're actually dry venting during times of perfectly normal weather, but they're still dry venting into rivers directly. So direct sewage dry venting. It's a shocker. Usually, treated sewage is mixed in with ordinary water, and then that can work. But of course, what happens is because the infrastructure is completely removed, sold off, etc. The actual maintenance, the actual pumping stations fail, so they just keep doing it. So yeah, this program is well worth seeing. I recommend it as well. It's got the wonderful David Thewlis in as well, the hospitalier angel in Kingdom of Heaven. It was
right. Okay. When I lived in the UK, the one thing that the Brits are proud of is nature.
Kills everything. Kills everything in the river.
But when are enough people going to stand up and care about this? Do you think maybe this documentary has a chance of doing that? Yeah, it does. David, have you watched it at all?
I haven't.
2 parts.
Thames Water, so I live in Thames Water, and our bills have doubled over the past year. So I'm kind of like aware of the Thames Water situation from the other side. But I want to bring up the point of our book that we made in our book, the unsustainable truth about the pensions and owning everything and so on. So the major shareholders of Thames Water is the Ontario retirement system, which is basically Canadian state pension. In that way, is a defined benefit, which means it's basically kind of the old traditional one. USS, which I actually am a member of because of my job as a university lecturer. This is the UK University Superannuation Scheme. That's the second largest one. Together, they're over 50%. ADIA, which is the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund, is another 10% investor. Another Canadian pension, British Columbia Investment Management. Hermes Investment, which is a ESG, kind of environmental focused investor in the UK. CIC, which is China's Sovereign Wealth Fund. These make up 89-90% of the shareholders of ownership. So they're all people who have individuals at heart in their mandate and governance. They're all people who are concerned about what we do to each other, to our environment, and so on. But they do what they do because we need our pensions.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but just for Ollie's sake, this is one of the things that people aren't getting. They're blaming them for it, but the reality is, right, it's our pensions that are investing in this destruction. It's like are you aware of it, Ollie?
Yes, yes. Yeah, there is a big. Actually, Fergal was banging on about. One of his main things he bangs on about is the shareholders. Who's going to pay for all of this? The fines, particularly the fines that they've been levied against them for all of this. And he's saying it won't be the shareholders. So who's it going to be? And we're all going, it'll be us, the public.
But the shareholders could be your grandma.
Yes, I know
that's the point, right?
Yes, I realise that. But it's a way of how do you actually create the money to pay, particularly the fines that they're being given, and that's I think another very interesting aspect of this is that at the same time as this is all going on, my bill went up, Thames obviously. 40%. I think it was a 40% rise and what they've been doing is, and David knows all this, is they've been keeping all the prices down for years, for decades. The prices to customers have been absolutely bottomed all the time. Now they've gone up by a huge amount because for the very simple reason is that what they're saying is we haven't been building in the infrastructure, and we have to build in the infrastructure now. Now we have to do it. With hands up, basically. We're very sorry we haven't been doing it all these years, but we didn't want to charge you. Be realistic. Now we're all drinking shit. We're going down to the beach in shit, because of this. Put
8-year-old girls dying, right, from swimming in shit.
Yes, literally. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. And the dad killed himself.
Who?
The father killed himself as well.
Right.
So this is all, and this is real life as well. It's not even just drama.
Yeah.
So
had a big impact, huh?
Yeah, it's very lowering, the whole thing. Anyway, yes, got to look after the shareholders.
Yeah.
Got to keep the pension funds.
Oh, sorry,
top.
but the shareholders are us, right? It's not just that little tiny percentage of people, right? So, and that's why David's book's really important. I got it? I haven't got it. Unsustainable Truth. Where is it? It's somewhere nearby. I want to move on. So the planetary emergency. So there's one which is called Where We Are Headed. So Professor Kevin Anderson, I think, is one of my favorite climate scientists because he says it how it is, and just based on trend lines and what we're releasing, and we're, last year we increased our emissions. We're not going down; it's only going up, and we're headed for a 3 to 4 degrees Celsius of warming across this century. This is like I from everything I understand, it's game over. So the fact that we're just continuing to do it, like, even the watercress example, the destabilizing, that biome where it can't do what it's doing, but we're doing that on a global scale.
Interestingly, right? Andrea, Kevin Anderson was in the oil business, which is I always find very interesting when it's people who've been in the industry are coming back with their, they literally and reboot themselves completely. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, and they know, right? I've said there's a big exodus from the oil industry, but we've built a whole system on it. It's not going to go away overnight. But basically, his whole thing is there are no non-radical pathways remaining to us. So, but another big piece that came out this week, and I want to get David to give me his physics head for this. Sea levels are already higher than many scientists think. So there's basically been a new study. Did you have a chance to have a look at it, David?
No, but carry on. I will pick it up.
So everyone who's working near the sea, on the sea, fishermen, local people, that sort of thing, they're already fully aware that the oceans are higher. But the official global number is that they're much, much higher than were previously thought. And that means hundreds of millions more people worldwide are basically living dangerously close to the rising ocean. The bigger impact is in Asia. This is where I was going to get your sense, and it's about how they've measured it in the past. So it's not that the studies are wrong; it's that there's other conclusions. I mean, what is it? So basically, they said it was something to do with, where is it? Oh, so this is your language, David. The way it was being measured. And a geoid model. Do you know that term? Which is a technique for estimating average sea level. So it's based on Earth's gravitational field. And now they've sort of changed it. But basically what it means is hundreds of millions of people, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, the Maldives, and other Southeast Asia Pacific nations.
Variations in sea level height. Different regions, right? Yeah.
So I'll show you an image. This is the image that comes with it, but it's going to be too tall for us to see it. So what I'll do is I'll just show you. Where is it? I'll just show you the Asia image, and that's the one with all the orange. So basically, where it's orange is where there's going to be. Oh, why did I do that? Sorry. Excuse me.
Where's he gone?
Oh, yeah.
Bad in nature, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
This
think there's another chart in there that's probably a little bit better along. So the problem is, if you go and ask someone where's sea level, you usually don't know. You could be living on a beach and you sort of say, well, where is your average sea level, whatever it is. You may have some experience of that as to what you think it is. So what happens with global warming is that the oceans warm and the water expands. So it's not just the melting of the ice. So there's a lot of ice that's collected on top of the shelf in Antarctica and places that have to do, or once you get permanent sea ice forming, then you get more ice on top from the rain and snow that falls on top that forms a very thick layer. So that's the amount that's released in addition to just water freezing. When water freezes, the volume doesn't change too much, but actually then you chuck a load of ice on top of it. When all that melts, that all comes out. Yeah. The other part of it is the fact that you're actually expanding the water by heating it. Yeah. So for a lot of places, the data on exactly where sea level is was never really measured because we don't live on every part of the coast and do all those measurements everywhere. So the model that they've done is to take a calculation of the gravitational potential, because the shape of the Earth is determined by how much it's pulled inside itself. The reason why Australians stand with their feet to the ground and I stand at the other side with my feet to the ground is we're both pulled to the center of the Earth by the gravity of the planet. And that's the same with water. So that defines that geoid, which is the shape of the water that you get around. And it defines land masses too in that way. Using that, they're able then to map more the actual surfaces of where sea levels actually needs to be everywhere in that way, back to the time before the warming and now, in that sense, because we know how much water there is. We haven't actually lost water out to space yet. So what they then find as a result is actually a lot of places have had rises in sea level than previous models, which is based on where we measured sea level to be, because we never measured it.
Yeah. So I just want to point out a couple of things in this map. So that big orange mess in Asia, so I'm right in the middle of that.
Yes.
Okay. Look at the coast of Australia. So the vast majority of Australians live there. Where you can see the blue line, that's because when the ice melts, the land is actually going to go up. So Greenland is expected to go up quite a lot. So you can see some blue dots around there. There's going to be some areas where they're going to go up. But if you look at that, I mean, if you look at the coastline of China, right, there's a lot of space in China for them to go. And as I've said in the past, they need to stay friendly with the Russians because they're going to have to go north too. But if you look at that, the middle, where basically ASEAN is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I mean, I'm presuming basically that entire block of orange on a country is Bangladesh. That's basically all over, right? So that's what they're looking at. So it's been underestimated. We obviously see it in real time out here. But I just thought it's a New York Times piece. I'll put it in the weekend reads, but I thought it was a interesting one to put into the mix.
It is. I just quickly flicked through it. And that area, that central orange mass, is where a lot of development and a lot of population is. In sort of that in Indonesian archipelago, going into sort of the Southeast Asia and stretching over to South Asia along in that way. And that's where a lot of this next decade of kind of industrial development is really intended to happen along.
Yeah.
They are the population centers, the Malaysia, the Indonesia, the Vietnam, and all of those places along. So this is going to have a huge impact about what happens. A lot of ship traffic goes through there, a lot of kind of agricultural produce, a lot of everything, basically.
Yeah. Well, and he's grown here too, right? So there's this massive wall being built along one side of Singapore, which is all about sort of keeping sea level at bay. They're fully aware where the risks are. But I wonder with this research, like what are the decisions that are being made today in this part of the world? Are they based on this information, or are they based on the other information? Because that's what the problem with the IPCC report is, that that conservative nature of it, the consensus nature of it means, we're only got a 2% GDP risk if we go up to 3 degrees warming, whereas the actuaries say it's a 50% GDP risk, and they're two very different things, right?
Well, I think that's not.
50%.
I think that's not the consensus nature of it. I think that's just simply because, for something like the GDP risk, the shape of the model matters a lot. Most of the economic models on climate change treats the economy like a football. Basically, it gets deflated when something happens, and then you pump it back up, and it carries on through. So the ball never actually breaks, which is why you have this sort of 2% GDP risk. And the other part of it is this presumption that each region is independent in that way. So most of the world's GDP is in developed countries. That's actually very well structured. So the model presumes that you can actually lose all the developing countries without really any impact on them. The world doesn't really work like that anymore.
No. So is that what the economists?
A lot of those basic models treat each of them sort of somewhat independently in that way. It's a very average sort of view in that way. It can't cope. It has sort of naive assumptions about what would immigration do, for example. You just think about what happens if you get an extra. One of the comments I think from our previous conversation, if you get the combination of war and climate driving immigration along, the consequence of GDP in such an environment is not what previous models expect. Previous models expect you have GDP growth from it. That's because it presumes the physical environment is there to provide for you. You've got more labor, you've got more people, you've got more of those things.
So, David, I know that economists aren't stupid, right? But how is this possible that groups of people think like that?
Well, they were originally designed in order to get politicians.
That's a good example.
to go and take action. So the whole kind of 1.5%, 2% were designed to show the potential loss of growth that you would have for you to take action, to have some part to take action. But if you tell them it's all going to go pear-shaped, they're not going to care. They're going to be saying, well, in that case, I'm going to do what Trump is now doing, which is I'm going to do the thing that makes sure I stay elected, that that I'm the greatest. So the original motivations to those models was actually to try and show how the whole global economy would be affected in that way. It wasn't meant to be a precise prediction of what's going to happen to you when you go to your supermarket.
Got a good example. Let me give you a good example briefly. It's on the Mekong River, so it's in the region, and it's the Mekong River where it runs all the way down to the Tonle Sap. And the Tonle Sap is a reverse flow current, seasonally reverse flow current river. And what the Tonle Sap does is it brings in all of the fish fry and everything else, and also the silt as well, rushes it all up to the flooded forest, and the flooded forest becomes a huge fishery that basically feeds 60 million people. So it's a massive, and it's the main economic driver in the region. So what has happened now is that China have there are lots of dams, obviously, now, unfortunately. And what dams do is they break the flow, and they break the possibility of the current during let's call it the monsoon, during the wet season, which creates this lovely reverse flow. So what the Chinese are particularly keen on doing now is building a series, I think 18 or 19 dams on the headwaters of the Mekong, way up at the very start, where they can, in their country, you see. But unfortunately, it is doing this massive blockage, and it's basically going to kill the flooded forest. It's going to kill the huge fish economy, the second biggest freshwater fishery or fish population in the world, and it's going to decimate the whole livelihood that's been there for, I don't know, 10 centuries or so. Who knows? You know, the whole country of Cambodia is based around this thing. You know, they have celebrations at the turning of the tide. The king and queen, little king and queen come out and do the whole ceremonial thing, and they have the boat races going up and down. It's brilliant, the whole thing, but it's being destroyed, and so of course is the Mekong dolphin as well. That's going the same way. But it's a good example of what happens when economies are broken into, from what I'm hearing, into their separate entities.
Yeah, Ollie, I absolutely adore your knowledge on rivers, lakes, and dams. I think it's such a unique basis of knowledge, and you've got it all over the world. And I think it's a really important addition to the conversation. But it's also a classic example of what you're talking about. You know, it's so enormous. Like, you think of the cultural links of the, you know, when you talk about the festival, right? They've got cultural ties to this, you know, and it's just disappearing before our eyes. Your chalk lakes, chalk streams, you know, this clear water. Our children will never see it. You know, it's like, and it's happening so fast.
Bonus: the water in Japan when they flood.
Oh yeah, you were talking about that.
It was crystal clear. And I saw a little blip somewhere. Where was it? It was somewhere else. It was in the region anyway. And they had drains. They had drainage, and they had a little aquarium.
Oh, the fish in them. Yeah. It was amazing.
Saw that.
Yeah. The Japanese are unique in that way, aren't they? David?
Just to give a kind of context, right? So the GDP of developing countries, excluding China, is under 20% of the global GDP. So from the basis of that sort of naive economic model, you say, take them all out, you lose 20%, less than 20%. So that sort of says, well, you know, if climate change gets really bad, we lose all the developing countries, and we're fine, we're 20% GDP, we lose, but we're going to grow along, you know, 2% a year. So we make it up in, like, you know, 10 years, less than 10 years kind of thing. What? And you look at the population, about, you know, kind of like 70-80% of the population of the world live in those countries. Those countries are kind of like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. They're the countries in that orange region that you're talking about. And so from a actual what happens to people perspective, the path of it is that you don't lose that 20% straight away. You're going to get a lot of those kind of people being displaced. The kind of things that you rely on for those things happening, because people are displaced, can't happen. They're going to find somewhere else to go. You're going to get border conflicts. I worked with a friend who was a Vietnam boat person over that time, who came from Vietnam and landed in the UK.
Very good fisherman.
Around, all over in that way. So you're going to find.
When you say a boat person, do you mean a refugee?
The boat
people. Yeah. As in they were sailing
not
from Vietnam on a boat, just going out across the world, trying to find a place to land.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And
is that what you meant? Comment.
They are good fishermen.
Oh,
yes,
excellent
fishermen, which is why they make the journey and able to do it. And along the way, what you're going to find is this comes into an environment where into a situation where your own physical environment, the water you need, the agricultural products that you want to have, the fact that you want to do regenerative agriculture, but it's gotten too hot. And the drought that happened has killed the soil, even though you're trying to regenerate it. Is going on. So you know, the economic models can't cope with really what you were pointing to. The cause and effects are actually being flipped around.
Yeah. I mean, is there a change? Are they starting to change? Are they starting to go, wait a minute, we might have so 20% of the world's GDP goes, 80% of the population goes, but the bigger things is all of the food. You know, I was just before we got on, I was talking. There was a piece about insects in the tropics. It's getting too hot, so they're dying out. So pollinators are going. So So, you know, when you actually look at the, you know, obviously we've got the refugee crisis, we've got the probably more authoritarianism because more walls, but the receiving countries can't take care of them, not just because of numbers, but because they're dealing with their own environmental concerns. So they can't grow enough food to take care of all of these people,
And
right?
their own internal
Exactly.
And their own internal displacement.
Yeah. So the good idea is to stop what we're doing so that doesn't happen.
No.
which is actually unfortunately not going to happen. So
Right.
what the reality we face is that this sort of nightmarish thing is going to start coming on. It's going to start crumbling what we want to keep safe. And actually, the better model is to think about how that becomes ways in which you can find your place in that sense, because the driving forces are very self-destructive and they're very self-reinforcing.
Yeah.
And because they're very self-reinforcing, it's just impossible by a kind of international agreement. Because at the end of it, if you look at what's happened with the UNFCCC, is this aspect where it's become a case of saying, well, can you give, I won't agree until you give me some money.
Yeah.
And the problem with that, I did this analysis along sort of quick calculation. 1.3 trillion is demanded for climate financing from the UNFCCC each year from the developed countries. And if you kind of include China within those and split that up amongst the countries, the UK's portion, the UK is supposed to give as a portion of that equates to its entire policing, immigration, and housing budget.
Yeah.
It's supposed to give that much money. And there's no way a party in the UK is going to be able to increase their global development budget, even if they were not increasing the defense budget at the same time.
Yeah, so we got to think about it in a different way, right? Because I mean, it's stupidity, and I always say wherever you are, you got to realize no one's coming to help you. So you got to get resilient in your own country, community focused, regenerate where you are. Do everything you can. But David, I got to say that was the most doomery thing I've ever heard you say. By the way,
Yeah.
But I appreciate it because it's realistic. I mean, this is the path that we're on. We've got to try, to turn it around. And to me, it's a case of if people could understand that the path that we're on, if we could get enough people, maybe we can turn it around. But we need 1 billion people understanding it.
Well,
so
no,
you need
1 billion people to be there when it fails to turn. That's where it turns. The tanker's going to crash. What you want is 1 billion people around who's going to be able to help support the things that comes out from it. To start and so on. So the idea of trying to turn this around is impossible. It's like, you're 3-0 down, you got 2 minutes left to the cup final.
Yeah. But it's who we choose to be as we move through the time,
or
recognizing that the disaster's in the mix, right?
A different way of looking at it might be to be, because it's such a massive chaos, is to look at what took you down a road, what were the problems that took you there. I'm thinking in the back of my mind about the Syrian exodus during the Syrian war, or the Syrian, what happened there. If you can apply that process to lots of different situations, I've just mentioned the Mekong River and the flooded forest and what happens when you dam it at the top. But if you look at the Syrian process, what happened there, to my understanding, basically they had a drought. They actually had some qanats that failed, and basically a lot of local people in the hills in Syria were actually basically turfed out first into a camp, and then they all ended up in Aleppo and so on. And I can't, just a minute. And then and then basically it expanded from there. That they had, I think it was about 1 million Syrians then ended up in Germany as refugees. But the whole process was very, very convoluted. But it all started with the shortage of water, and it all ended up in a sort of the uprising in Syria, and then it expanded from that. So if you can, the point is, if you can look at the trail of issues that led to a problem, if you can feed back to the source of it, then you can maybe find solutions.
Yeah. All right. I want. No, you're right. I want to do one more story, but before I show you this, we do this story. I want to show you this, which just popped up on Twitter today, and this is. Well, it's all right. I'll leave you need. Just mute. I'll just mute Ollie. What are we doing? All right. There we go. This is where AI is going to take jobs, and the red bit is where we currently are, and the blue bit is the potential. Can you read it?
Yes.
David, can you read it? So
the blue bit is the potential.
Blue bit is the potential jobs based on where AI is today. The red bit is where jobs are currently being taken. But I want everyone to look at this, right? So management, I think David, you or Richard said last week, management 100% can be taken over. Business and finance, computer and maths, architecture and engineering, life and social science is a bit lower. Then you've got legal, arts and media, which is a bit depressing, and office admin. So these are all AI jobs that we're not using AI currently at its efficient space to take all of these jobs out of the market, but that's the.
I hate to disagree with you. I hate to disagree with you.
This isn't my opinion. I'm just showing some data.
I'm looking at this. I'm thinking food and serving, grounds maintenance. They can go very easily. Agriculture is already kind of gone. If you look at intensive agriculture, they're farmed by tractors that run on automated GPS guided systems with irrigation that's run by all of that.
This is current AI use and what it is potentially do. It doesn't mean that all those other jobs are safe. It just means this is where current AI is being used and its maximum potential based on what AI can do today. I just thought it was really interesting, like how much we're not using based on its potential. So, but there's a piece, and it's in an Indian publication called The Wire. Let's get this like this. And it's called AI Colonialism. We've talked about AI before, and we've talked about how it's much more than just water and energy. It releases forever chemicals. We're hearing lots of stories. So if you've heard the term NIMBY, not in my backyard, I think I can agree with everyone that data centers seem to be the one thing you don't want in your backyard. Yeah?
Yeah. Well, they destroy the neighborhoods, don't they, basically?
Yeah, and electricity bills go up, water usage, and then, of course, releasing the chemicals as well as noise pollution. So that seems to be the big issue. Yeah, yeah. But this piece is basically referring to who will bear the cost of AI colonialism. And it starts off with this guy called Lawrence Summers, who David will probably know. He was the chief economist of the World Bank in 1991. And there was an internal memorandum that got released, and it suggested that the World Bank should encourage the relocation of dirty industries to less developed countries. It came out, it went public, and it was called Toxic Colonialism, Toxic Imperialism, Cultural Imperialism. So just recently there was a piece about a big shipment that arrived in Malaysia of e-waste that was illegal. So, waste from other parts of the world coming to this part of the world is something we've talked about a lot. At the time, Lawrence Summers was considered impeccable economic logic. I've talked about when I went to Bangalore and really had a look at Bangalore from the IT industry came in and set up all this infrastructure, all these jobs, amazing, right? But the environmental destruction, the societal destruction, everything that came with it, I could see no responsibility for that. So local farmers were out. There's a lot of water issues there. So now what they're looking at doing is putting these mega data centers into these countries. So India has a lot of water issues in different parts of the country. They're talking about putting it into one of the areas where the caste is called, where is it? The Dalits. And yeah, the Dalits. And these are sort of tribal geographies, and screw them. So, right. And all of these countries and their governments are going for it. We were talking about, I think it was it Paraguay or somewhere last week, where the government was in the US as their grid fell over in an extreme heat event, and the government was in the US to negotiate building data centers, right? So in countries where they're already having issues with their water, with extreme heat, they're looking at investing in these data centers. There's the people that are going to be impacted. It's going to be absolutely revolting for them. It's not going to create the jobs, and in the meantime, it's also going to replace the jobs, because those data centers are going to replace the bulk of the jobs that countries like India do, which are the call center operators and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, thoughts? Did you have a chance to look at it?
About Larry Summers is that he was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Treasury. And the head of the, I think, National Economic Council with Barack Obama. So he's a very left-wing economist. So this, I think that says more than anything else in a way. He's not a right-wing economist who thinks...
No, so it's just that Western imperialism again.
And he's very much a belief that, he's very much a belief of the globalization as a good thing, which in many ways it is a good thing, without really allowing that to be something that you globalize by allowing, it's like your garden, right? There are two ways to do your garden. There's the way where you go to a garden center, you buy all the stuff you want, you lay it out, and you go and dig up whatever there is, chuck it away, and plant them in. That's the globalization model that we currently have been living under. And then there's the other way of gardening, which is to go along and actually see what there is in the garden, see how you can plant them around in different places, and saves you a lot of money from having to go to the garden center, and what's there actually works. So what he's advocating is very much this part where we go to the garden center, we go and get all this stuff, we plant it in all these places. It makes the garden looks beautiful to our eyes.
Yeah, superficial. Yeah, quick fix.
Yeah, I've got Rosie commenting, Meta has colonized Africa undersea cables. I wonder why. And also another big story, of course, is Meta and its glasses this week, right? Yeah.
There's also a very good film out. I think it's a film. It may have been out for a while, called I've forgotten the name of it now. It's basically about road and belt and things like that. It's about buying up parts of the world for agriculture. Huge companies basically buying it up, big money buying it up, and everybody's doing it. And what was it called? It's I'll post it up later. But it's of course Pup from the club was absolutely steam coming out of his ears about it. Yeah. It was very good, and but it talks about this process quite well. It's basically the thing they are working on is food. Privatizing food, if you like, nationalizing food for anywhere in the world, just making sure they got their hands on supplies of food that are secure. And it's like
energy security, food security, right? Yeah, all of it. Yeah.
I mean, it's not okay. The word security is used in order to make it seem like a appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
It's not actually guaranteeing anything. What it guarantees is the ability to have whatever it is that you're financed to be able to do to take effect.
Yeah. It's certainly scary. I'll find the name of this. It's a scary thing. Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap up. What are you paying attention to that is a distraction from the ugliness of our world.
I was putting together a new greenhouse. I broke my old one when I was trying to clear some branches, and they fell on it. That was just around December. So we got a new one along. Just putting the frames together. I'm going to need an extra 2 pairs of hands in order to try and hold them while we actually put it up and stuff.
Are you adding in a little bit of solar to your greenhouse? It is a solar event, of course, but
yeah. So I'm not adding any direct solar. I actually want to do one thing, which is so I've got this idea that I want to be able to dig a natural pond, and obviously I need to store water for it, and so I need something to store water. And I realized that actually in my old physics self, you go out if your area's radius increased by 1.7. Sorry, I've got a lot of drilling going on outside.
Yeah, right. I'm talking where it's coming from.
Your volume is, your surface area is tripled. So I think about a water container, and I put solar panels on top of that to catch the water. I can actually give myself shade. I can put a bench underneath it.
Perfect.
So I think that's more the path I want to try and explore.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything. Ollie? I'm not doing anything much. I'm just working hard in stone. Of course, I've got a distraction this coming week. A cross fell off a church, and it didn't break. That's very unusual. So, and it was a long drop, and it's quite a modest cross. It's about 2 foot by 2 foot by whatever 2 inches. Quite a sweet little thing. And it's off a local church just around the corner. And so I'm going to get Dan to help me, the Hungarian. And we're either going to put up a tower or a ladder. I think I'm going to put up a small tower. And that will be like a little something different this week. And we'll just pop it back on. Either on a metal thing, or even just on an inverted pebble as a dowel. You just put the pebble in and you put the cross, hollow out a little hole in it, and it sits on top of the pebble. Yeah.
And is the cross made of stone?
Oh, it's a stone. Yeah, it's a little limestone cross. Yeah, but it didn't break. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
It fell on gravel, and it didn't. It fell on gravel. I think it fell on sort of gravel, and it cushioned its fall. It's quite a long drop. I can tell you, it's a good 10 meters, I think. So it's
maybe we can take it as a positive sign that it didn't break. All right, so I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you some things that you can do. So David's message is go and grow a garden, go and grow food. Ollie's is work with your hands, and mine is if you want to turn your brain off. So obviously with what was happening this week, my children, or my sons, they're 18 and 19 now, so they're no longer children. They've got a lot of questions, and they're making a lot of assumptions. We've got to remember our kids get news pushed to them. We go and seek news. So our kids have got a lot of questions. So check in on your kids. They've been quite negatively impacted by this. It's for them. It's oh God, another bad thing. So check on your kids. So we always try and help our kids to be more open-minded about things that there's never one answer. There's never one side. So we watched Argo, which of course is a Ben Affleck movie. We then watched Wag the Dog, because everyone's talking about Wag the Dog, and the whole concept is they come up with this storyline to get the president in the United States elected. And if you look at the storyline that they're trying to work on now, it doesn't look like they had someone like Dustin Hoffman's character helping them. And then the final thing is we watched I Swear. That's the Scottish movie about the guy with Tourette's that got a lot of attention because of the BAFTA. Thanks, Rosie. Thanks for joining us. It is an incredible movie. Have you guys seen it?
No.
Absolutely
I haven't
brilliant.
seen it yet, but
Absolutely brilliant.
I don't know if you heard the story at the BAFTA where he won the BAFTA award.
Oh yeah.
That the person with the Tourette was there, and he basically had to leave because he was swearing, and the people didn't accept that. And the BAFTA people were blamed afterwards for having swearing.
Yeah, and then the BBC was blamed and all that sort of stuff, but it actually missed the whole point, right? The movie is about all of us having more compassion for each other, and
Yes.
my boys, there was a young girl at school, and she was a beautiful little kid, and both of the boys were so patient with her. They were so gentle. They never, they were never those boys that mocked someone for being different, and so it was a beautiful experience watching it with our boys. So I encourage everyone to watch it because we need to have more compassion for each other.
Yes.
But anyway, let's wrap it up. Thank you, Ollie, for coming and joining us.
Fun.
If we have an emergency for another co-host, will you come back?
Of course.
Yeah.
Bring across.
It's 7 o'clock at this time of year, and when the clock changes, it's 8 o'clock, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not as bad, right? That's soon, isn't it?
Hope so.
Yeah. I'm going to be 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I don't know. Whichever way it is.
No. It's 8. It's 8. I've actually got people who won't agree until the clocks change back.
It is 8. It can only go one way and then the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so
Sandra another time.
Yeah, we've got Joanne Flynn joining us next week, so it's going to be a much more of a pure sustainability chat. She really talks at the board level, so it's going to be more of a business focused conversation. So I'm sure David, you'll enjoy that. Richard won't be with us, but Joe will be. But thanks, and we'll see you all next Friday. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the great
David.
comments too.
Thank
you, everybody.
Lovely.
Thank you to everybody listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Yep.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye now.